New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
What if the person you think you are is just a fraction of who you truly are? What if years of conditioning and surviving in a challenging world have left you clinging to strategies and beliefs that mask your truest nature? I'm Catherine Duca, Psychotherapist and Self Esteem Coach, and you're listening to Who Do You Think You Are? A show that looks beneath our psychological masks and uncovers our profoundly messy, beautiful, brilliant, tender-hearted essence. Join me as we go in search of the hidden power of our true selves. I'm so glad you're here. And you all know that to be absolutely true. I am so glad to be with you tonight, this Sunday evening. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to Who Do You Think You Are? A podcast dedicated to you, your well-being, and everything positive in your life. Here on the show, we talk about how to have the highest regard for yourself, how to live from a place of genuine self-respect and self-love, and how to make yourself a priority in your own life. Meet me here each week for curated tips and strategies designed to help you drop your psychological masks, connect with your truest essence, and simply live life more easily. Why? Because we know that when we approach life in this way, we naturally and effortlessly have more room, more generosity, and more love for one another. And dear listeners, wide receivers, when have we needed love more than this very day? Welcome, welcome. A couple of announcements before we dive into tonight's topic. First, a very important reminder. If you find yourself struggling with something, if you're going through something, if you're up against something, a conflict, if you are hitting an emotional wall of some sort and you can't shake it or you can't get through and you're not sure what your next right step is, don't go it alone. I encourage you, get some help, call someone. There is very qualified help available to you. Let someone support you. Let someone accompany you. You do not have to white knuckle anything. All right. If you are looking for prayer, miraculous prayer, contact someone on the show, New Thought Media Network. Drop an email to any of the practitioners or ministers on the show. Get yourself some beautiful, uplifting, forward-moving prayer. If you want to talk to a mental health professional, and I can help you with that in any way. If you would like help with a referral, just drop me a line at Catherine@CatherineDuca.com. That's Catherine@CatherineDuca.com anytime, and let me know what you need, and I will do my best to help you out. Don't go it alone. All right. You'd be surprised what a difference it can make when you unburden yourself and share your struggles with someone who wants to know you, wants to hear you, wants to see you. It can make a world of difference. Also, if you find tonight's content valuable and useful, please like, share, and subscribe. Drop a comment. That helps keep the algorithm happy. And when the algorithm is happy, the show goes out to more and more people. So be a contributor to spreading the word here on New Thought Media Network. Not just my show, but all the wonderful shows on this station. All right. So tonight's topic. Uh, we're going to talk about something tonight that is not only important, but it's quite tender. It's quite tender. And that is what happens when a goodbye isn't mutual. So that's the name of the show tonight. When goodbye isn't mutual. Now, you know the kind of ending I'm talking about. The ending that never got a final conversation. The one where you were left holding the ache, the questions, the confusion. And they, the other person, well, they may have just walked away without offering any sort of reason or without sharing their thought process. So, tonight in this conversation, we are going to name that ache. We're exploring how healing can still happen. It can still happen. In fact, peace of mind dictates that it must happen, even when closure isn't possible. So, if you're joining live, a special welcome to you. Feel free to drop thoughts or reflections in the chat. I'll be weaving some of your words, your comments into the conversation as we go. So please, any and all are welcome on this show. Now, this is potentially a very wide topic, the idea of unresolved goodbyes. The kind of goodbye I'm specifically talking about tonight is the goodbye in a relationship where it ended and you don't feel or you haven't felt a sense of, I'm going to say it, I'm going to say the word closure. Closure. We're going to be talking quite a bit about closure, but I'm confining my remarks to that type of unhealed ending. There are so many ways in which relationships end. Uh, you know, uh, I'm probably not going to talk about when someone in your life passes unexpectedly, because that deserves a conversation unto itself. So I'm talking about, yes, the person may have passed, but you left, or the last time you interacted with that person, there was some level of conflict, and you have been walking around feeling unresolved, unresolved. So, um, so we have to start with closure. Now, that's a word that's bandied about so very often. We're taught to believe that closure is a milestone of sorts, a destination, an end point when there has been an ending. And we come to expect that healing occurs or closure occurs when both parties come together, have a conversation, have a meeting of the minds, a meeting of the hearts, and part, if not amicably, part with some level of mutual understanding. That's what we think of when, or I think that's what many people think of when they think about closure. But what if that doesn't happen? What if that doesn't happen? And I think all too often it does not. You know, I've worked with many clients over the years who waited and waited and waited for an apology that never came. In fact, as I was preparing for the show tonight, one particular client came to mind, but she actually typifies so many people. Um, See if this resonates with you in any way or someone you know. She waited and waited and waited for her person to call her back. And she kept rehearsing and perfecting the conversation she would have had he called her back or had she run into him someplace. And she kept checking her phone incessantly. And by incessantly, I mean incessantly, every hour, every couple of hours. And this went on for almost 2 years. 2 years. And in that waiting, she was agonizing. And in that waiting, her healing was on pause, right? Her life was at a standstill. Can you picture this? Right? She felt unresolved, and she lived in a state of hopefulness, the kind of hope where she told herself, he's got to call. He just has to call. He can't possibly let it end this way. And so she checked her phone on the hour for nearly 2 years, didn't move on, and really was consumed by the fact that she didn't have the satisfaction of saying what she felt she needed to say. Now, I think if you live long enough, you encounter this sort of thing. You know, you wait for someone to validate your pain, to acknowledge the rupture, to give you the all important, the so deeply longed for, I am sorry. I'm sorry I hurt you. But sometimes they won't, or don't, or can't. And that's where the real work begins. Because to stay in that place of, what's the word, incredulity, to be in disbelief and incredulous, how could they do this, is, and you know this, if you've done this or if you're doing it currently, I know a thing or two about this. I've done this myself. You live almost in a state of limbo, and there's kind of an open wound on your heart, and it becomes the backdrop to everything you do and everything you don't do in your life. So this whole idea of closure that's viewed as this clean, neat ending, this mutual agreement, this final chapter. In fact, the very definition of closure, I looked it up, is bringing to an end, bringing to a conclusion. This whole notion, I believe, in truth, particularly when it comes to a relationship ending, is rarely clean. It's rarely even-handed. And the unfortunate truth is it's rarely given. It's rarely given. So I would say that closure, as we have come to know it in this kind of destination-y sort of way, is really a myth. It's a myth. And I think most often what we're looking for, hoping for, yearning for when we think closure is an apology or an acknowledgement that the other person hurt you in some way, right? Isn't that true? Isn't that true? We desperately, almost desperately want the other person to reconsider or regret or reevaluate their decision to leave. We probably don't want them to say goodbye. But here's the thing. Here is the undeniable thing. If they are leaving, or if they have already left, if they're leaving or if they have already left, we have two choices. And I can only think of two. If you can think of another choice and you have access to the chat, let me know. But I can only think of two choices. One is what many of us typically do, and that is pine or long for, yearn for, or languish, such as I said my client did for those couple of years. Or two, and this is where I'm aiming all of my comments tonight, make sense as best we can out of what happened. Make sense out of what happened. Honor our own experience. And do what we can to move forward without needing their participation. So this second choice is to review what happened, honor your own truth, your own experience, and look to move forward in your own one precious life without their participation. And I say without their participation because you're not getting their participation. See, here's the thing. In the face of not getting their participation or any contact from them or anything whatsoever, if you still keep yourself in a state of hope, you are perpetuating without realizing it. No, no one sets out to do this, but think about it. You're perpetuating your own hurt and your own limbo. And, tick-tock on our lives. We're not here on this earthly plane anyway, for, an indefinite amount of time. So to spend a good part of it languishing and lamenting and all those kinds of emotions, waiting in futility for that phone to ring, for that text to come through, to be, as my client told me, to be at a red light and praying that she looks over and sees the person at the light next to her, and she fantasizes what she would do, and she lives and longs for that moment. Well, you can see how that's just a prescription for unhappiness. So the idea, as I said before, of honoring yourself, honoring your truth, and making sense of what happened, I call that emotional integration. Emotional integration. I don't call it getting over it. I don't call it forgetting about it. I don't call it moving past it per se. I refer to it more as allowing this experience, this painful experience, this unwanted experience, to become a part of your life narrative, simply a part of your story, not a piece that defines you, but a part that is, a part of the mosaic that is your life. Your life. So you've heard me talk about, if you've tuned in before, emotional integration. We have various parts of ourselves. We're very strong in certain ways. We can be determined. We can be level-headed, clear-eyed, decisive. We can be excellent problem solvers over here. But then over here, in another part of our lives, we can feel like we're plagued by inertia, like we're in a fog, like we are clinging to something. Sometimes we don't even know what we're clinging to, some vague notion that we will somehow change or that someone else will change. And, when we do that, when we wait for someone else to give us that feeling of maybe making things more complete for ourselves, we give our power away. We abdicate our power. We hand it over. Can you hear that? We hand it over. And we tether our own healing to their willingness, And I submit to you that that's a pretty precarious place to live. Because maybe they will, but maybe they won't. And if they won't or don't or can't, are you going to continue to put your life on hold? So this is an important topic. I see way too many people who find themselves in that spot. They're really caught there. And this is a very tender spot where there is an unresolved conversation, where the person simply is unwilling or the person is gone, and that conflict is left dangling. That's a very, very painful space to live in. So what is the alternative? How do we achieve that second choice of, giving ourselves the completion that we need. None of us is a mind reader. None of us can speak really for that other person. We don't know what was on that person's heart or in that person's mind, do we? No, especially if we're perplexed by their exit. So I think the piece of work that's called for here is something that I call narrative repair. Narrative repair. Now, what is that? Well, that's the process. And this whole thing is a process. It's not an overnight occurrence. It's not something that one conversation can turn around. I hope this conversation helps you look at this differently. And I hope that you will consider trying on some of the suggestions I'll make a little later on in the show. But what is narrative repair? Well, it's the process of reclaiming your story. Reclaiming is the operative word. So even if they never acknowledged what happened, here's what you can say to yourself. Even if they never acknowledged what happened, I will, to myself, in the privacy of my own mind and my own heart. Even if they never recognized my worth, I will, in the privacy of the depths of my heart. Even if they never said goodbye, I will find my own ending. Can you hear that? So regardless of what they did or didn't do, the healing is in your hands. It's in your hands. So whether they betrayed you, ignored you, took advantage of you, your healing is within your capacity. It's in your hands. Now, here's the part that may not tickle. In fact, this may be a bit uncomfortable because you may have to confront some uncomfortable truths about yourself. So this is the part my clients don't really care for, at least initially. But I'm going to lay it out anyway, and stick with me. Hear me out here. So maybe you turned a blind eye toward that person's behavior. Maybe they did things, maybe there were red flags, and you overlooked them. You rationalized, you minimized them, you justified, you made excuses. And this is not the same thing. This is an important point. Rationalizing someone's behavior and sweeping it under the rug is not the same as being tuned in to their background, to their story, their origin story, their own woundedness. Because if you've listened to the show, you've heard me say many times, and if not, you'll hear it maybe for the first time. I say that I think I'm going to use the should word. We should all be, sensitive if we know other people's woundedness. We should be careful. We should be mindful not to, rush in and trigger them, casually or without self-awareness, because I think self-awareness does require that we be aware of ourselves and the people we interact with. But, and here's the big but, that's not the same as being responsible for other people's wounds. The only person who is responsible for healing or cleaning up our wounds is the person who has the wound. So I'm responsible for my wounds, no one else, not my partner in life, not my prayer partner, not my friends. No one is responsible for cleaning up my wound. I am. Nor am I responsible for cleaning up your wound or my client's wound or anyone's wound. So there is a distinction between being tuned in and aware and sensitive to versus feeling responsible for. And I think if we get that distinction down, I think life can proceed much more easily and our relationships can flow more easily. A couple more points, and then I'll take a break and I'll go to the chat. So you may have to confront some uncomfortable truths and acknowledge your piece, your participation in how things got to where they are, whatever percentage yours might be. So even if you have 5%, I think it's important. In fact, I feel strongly about this. It's important to acknowledge your 5%, as painful as that, that honest reflection might be. But here's the thing about doing that honest reflection. That will help you redirect your attention from blame. Okay, even if you're right about what happened, because this doesn't have to, become about right or wrong, because that actually can trap you. Even if you're right, waiting to see that person at the red light so that you could finally tell them, they were wrong. You were right the whole time. It's just going to, again, keep you in that perpetual limbo. So whatever your piece is, acknowledging that will help you release yourself from something that was done to you, even if it was. You redirect from blame and possible victimization to self-growth. Because here's the thing again. If you had some participation and didn't realize it at the time, owning that now, understanding it now, having insight into what led you to do that now is your path forward. That's your growth. So it's not about rewriting the facts. Never. But it is about reclaiming your voice. You are the author now. You are the author of your narrative. So if the narrative was he or she or they didn't acknowledge me, they betrayed me, they went behind my back, how dare they? I thought we were in this together, and then they just switched off. And gosh, that's so painful. Let's have a moment of silence for just how painful that feels. They switched off, they disappeared, they ghosted, even after, some time together. It's so painful. The storyline can shift from, they did that awful thing to me, and I don't know how I'm ever going to get over it. And in fact, listen to this, I refuse to get over it. Let me mention this. Underneath being, quote, unable to move on is often a hidden refusal to move on. Why? Because refusal can be, in an odd way, gratifying. Because as long as we're mad, angry, protesting, having that imaginary conversation, how the hell could they do that to me? What was wrong with them? As long as we have that storyline, guess what? There's no growth. There is no moving forward. There is only tick-tock on our precious time. But if we can identify something we may have done, something we may have overlooked, something maybe we did that the other person was trying to tell us and we never saw it their way. But maybe with hindsight, we can. Then that gives us something to work on. And friends, I submit to you that is infinitely more gratifying than holding on to the notion that they're going to come back. That is a dead end, a go nowhere, even from the grave. Even from the grave. You see? So if you find yourself clinging and holding on to this hope, I invite you, I encourage you, I really very strongly suggest that you try this information on, apply it to yourself, and see what happens. See what happens. Okay, that's a mouthful. I think I need to take a breather. Maybe you do too, and digest what has been said. Let's take a short break. We're about halfway through the hour. Let's take a short break. And when we come back, I'll go to the chat and I'll talk about some things that we can do, some things that I've done personally in my own life. And I offer to clients all the time that you can try to move yourself along if you find yourself stuck looking for a goodbye that is very likely not coming. You're listening to Who Do You Think You Are? I'm Catherine Duca, psychotherapist and self-esteem coach. And we'll be right back after this commercial. Stay with me.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center, Ottawa, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for being part of the New Thought Media Network. Please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.
And welcome back. I'm Catherine Duca, your host. You're listening to Who Do You Think You Are? If you're just joining us, we are talking about a very, I think, a very tender topic, and that is, what do we do when someone has walked away or left us and there was never a goodbye? And we find ourselves holding on to the promise that somehow, some way, at some point in time, we will get our wish, and they will say, "I'm sorry." They will apologize. They will acknowledge the hurt that we feel. In the first half of the show, I framed out how holding on to that hope is not only most likely futile, but it is self-abandoning. It is self-abandoning. Why do I say that? Because when that happens, when we do that, we abdicate our power and we actually place ourselves in a position where that we can't get out of as long as we're in this position, as long as this is our perspective, where this bad thing was done to us and we can't escape it and we can't move on and we can't feel better until they give us what we feel we deserve, and that is an apology. But that is probably going to result in a very long wait if that's where, you find yourself caught. And I say that with all the empathy I have, and also with recognition, because, I've been there. I know what that feels like. I know what that feels like in I remember in my body, in my mind, how preoccupied I was. I couldn't believe that, I would walk around and I couldn't believe that other people weren't like, when they spoke to me, that they couldn't tell that I was so preoccupied with this and that this was like the worst thing that could ever happen, because I was consumed wall to wall in my mind with how confused I was and how abandoned I felt. Little did I realize at the time that I was abandoning myself by holding on for an inordinate amount of time. Now, there's no time on the clock. There's no requirement on the calendar that says when we should release this burden. But when it's too long. When you're suffering. When you're languishing. When you can't feel happy, right? So let's talk about, let me go to the chat for a moment. Claudia, welcome. It's good to see you here, Claudia. Thank you. I just got distracted. Claudia says, 40 years ago, this past July, I went through a permanent breakup. It was tough. It was hard to let go, but I did let go. And in doing so, I grew up. Well, that's the operative. Claudia, I can hear the pain in that. It was tough, hard to let go. But when you did, you grew up. And if you're still here, if you're still listening, I wonder if you would mind letting us know how that felt, when you realized, whenever that was, I'm growing up. Was that gratifying? Did that give you a feeling of mastery? I'll bet it did, because that's what happens when we shift from they have to do this, they just have to do this, to no, I have to do this for myself. All right. Thank you, Claudia. Thanks so much. Tony, I still remember our last words toward one another. Me, you don't love me. Her, 9 hours later, you want anything to eat or drink? And then she walked out the front door, never to return. Tony, that's a heartbreaker. That's a heartbreaker. Anyone can read that and hear the heartbreak there. Now, Tony, I that is probably even more layered than what we're talking about tonight. And, for you or for anyone carrying that kind of pain, you know what I'm going to say. I encourage you to share that story with someone you trust. Share that story with someone who can help you navigate that pain. I don't think the pain is ever going to go away. I have, this is a different story. It's not quite on that level, but I had a dear friend. She was a wonderful therapist, a beautiful person, and we would have lunch every couple of weeks. And this was a person who, gosh, and everyone loved her. She took care of people. She was such a kind person. She took care of herself too. But she, was always just so kind. Anyway, I got the flu and I was getting over it, and a couple of weeks had passed. And I said to myself, you know what? I'm going to call her tonight and just let her know I'm thinking about her, because she was always the one to call me. And I remember I had a flip phone, and I opened the phone and I started dialing her number. I'll never forget. I could tell you what night of the week it was. It was 5 minutes to 11. I remember everything about it. I started dialing her number, and then I started to feel a little queasy because I was getting over the flu, but it wasn't that bad. But anyway, I closed the phone and I said to myself, I'll call her tomorrow. I'll call her tomorrow. And you know how the story ends. There was no tomorrow. She died. I found out the next day that she died shortly after 11 o'clock that night. And I was about to call her at 5 minutes to 11 to let her know I was thinking of her and I just love her. And she's a doll and I'm so glad she's in my life. And I never made that call. Now, we didn't have a conflict, so that's a little different. But I was left blaming myself. Why didn't I do it? Why didn't I do it? I didn't feel that badly, so on and so forth. And, I've had to forgive myself, and no earthly conversation, but I talked to her in spirit, and I don't know if she's listening, but I think she knew my heart when she was here. And if she's on another plane, as I believe she is, I do know she knows my heart today. But I'm just saying that, this kind of regret just lives in our heart. So let's talk about some things we can do, some concrete things we can do. By the way, let me just go to Claudia because I asked her. Claudia, thank you. After some time went by, I felt stronger. See, that's great. I knew what I wanted from that moment on. So that permanent breakup that was painful, that was tough, led you, it sounds, Claudia, to have more clarity for yourself, to know what you wanted from that moment on. And I'm going to guess that you got what you wanted from that moment on, and that's infinitely more gratifying than had you waited or simply let time cure all wounds, which I don't know. Time can cover up wounds. I don't know how healing it is, but thank you, Claudia. Thank you very much. Let me go on to some practices for healing without reconciliation. Let's talk about how we do this. I found these practices powerful, as I said, for myself, for my clients, and for anyone navigating an unresolved goodbye. There is the letter. The letter. I encourage you to write a letter that, and hear me on this, that you will never send. I repeat, put it in your sock drawer. Burn it, bury it, do something else with it, but do not send the letter. But here's what I encourage you to include in that letter. What happened from your point of view? Oh, by the way, let me preference. In the letter, don't ask questions. Why did you do this? How could you have done this? What were you thinking? Why? Because they're not really here to answer you. They're not really here to answer you. Now, I suppose you could go to a medium of some sort, or someone with the ability, to see into other people's minds, et cetera, et cetera. But short of that, I'm talking purely psychologically. Don't ask questions in the letter. State yourself what you believe happened. State what you felt, what you needed, what you are releasing, and what you are reclaiming. Okay? What happened, what you felt, what you needed, what you are releasing, the hope, the holding on, the fantasizing, the turning a blind eye, overlooking, sweeping under the rug, justifying. These are things that we do that keep us holding on. And then we say the other person was totally at fault. So these are the things that I think have the greater chance of setting you free. So burn the letter, bury the letter, read it out loud, and then put it somewhere. Put it somewhere in your sock drawer. Okay? Those of you who journal, and if you don't journal, if you don't have a journaling practice, I think one could be very rich and rewarding. Why? Because when we have thoughts that swirl in our heads, when we're caught in a cycle or in a loop, nothing new gets, nothing old or stale gets out. None of the old thoughts, the old perceptions get out, and nothing fresh comes in. It's like a closed echo chamber. in our minds. So when we put ourselves in a position to express our thoughts and our feelings in words, and the best way to journal, better than typing, by the way, is to take a pen and paper and actually write. There's something about the brain and the body and the connection that makes this more real. Express your thoughts, because you'll be very, very surprised. People tell me this all the time, and I've experienced it. You go from this vague swirling to, as Claudia experienced, a more clarifying position. You articulate your thoughts. And when you put your vague thoughts or emotions into words, and you're looking at them and you're reading them, and you have some objectivity there between you and your words, well, something very unexpected often happens. You hear yourself differently. You hear yourself almost the way you would hear another person say those same things. And you can give yourself some empathy and some compassion. So, a final journal prompt: if I were the author of this ending, here's how I would like it to go. Now, of course, it's not going to go that way, because the past is in the past. But by stating how you would like it to go, you sort of give yourself, I don't know, you give yourself a higher consciousness ending. And that has a certain vibration to it, a certain frequency. And now you can begin to live in that higher frequency rather than the lower, much lower frequency of blame and victimization and stuckness. So I feel that can be enormously helpful. There's also somatic rituals of release. I really like these. While you're thinking about this ending and the reconciliation that never happened, if you move your body, now this has been, research backs this up. If you move your body, if you dance, if you walk, if you stretch, if you shake off the energy, you are moving stagnant energy around this issue. If you can, get into some sort of water, bathe or swim or shower intentionally, and envision the stale, futile, outdated way of looking at this issue with fresh eyes. Look at it anew. Look at it with the power you are taking back, the way Claudia did. All right? Go in nature. Bury something symbolic. Bury something symbolic. Sit under a tree. Don't poo-poo this idea. All right? You're not Isaac Newton. I'm not, but sit under a tree. The energy of trees are very, very important, especially a tree with a beautiful canopy, a canopy of protection. It's symbolic. You absorb the vibe. And a tree has roots, and you can feel the roots in the ground supporting you. Supporting you. We are an extension of nature. We're all one. We're all one in this universe. We're all one. Higher consciousness tells us so. Okay, so a few minutes? Sure. Let me go to the chat. All right, Janine. Welcome, Janine. Good to see you. I think when these things happen, as much as it feels intensely personal for obvious reasons, it may really not be about us at all. It's the other person's hurt inflicted on others. Yeah, because, and Dawn is saying, important point, Janine, absolutely, because we've all heard the saying, hurt people hurt people. As I was saying before, and again, if you've been listening, so many of us are walking around in some state of unhealedness. And this is why. self-awareness, self-reflection is key to walking this earth infinitely more grounded, infinitely more self-protected, but not the kind of protection that comes from layers and layers of shields and walls and cover-ups and masks, but the protection that comes from, I know who I am. And as Claudia said, I know what I want. I know that I will land on both feet because these hurts, and maybe this very hurt that we're addressing here, will help me mature psychologically. So we don't have to feel, yes, it's painful, but we don't have to feel that this was done to us, like as if the person was capable of doing better, because sometimes what they're showing you is their capacity. Their capacity. They're showing you their level of psychological, spiritual maturity. And does it sting? Of course. I'm not saying it doesn't. But bearing the sting, and then part two, reflecting on where this could be coming from in the other person. And part three, what you need to do to rise above it, to transmute this pain, not bypass it, but transmute it. Say, this is painful, but I'm going to look at something in myself that I would not have looked at otherwise, or may not have, probably wouldn't have looked at had this unfortunate, painful thing not happened. And that's where you take, I don't know, groveling, and you make it growth. You take victimization and you make it your victory. And that's not nothing. So, dear listeners, friends, I say, with this big conversation tonight, and with benefit of the sharing in the chat, take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. Ask yourself, are you living with a goodbye that never felt complete? Well, if so, what part of that story still lives within you? What part needs to be acknowledged and released? What part of you needs to be acknowledged and released? So if you have a journal handy, or if you're going to do more self-reflection tonight or tomorrow, ask yourself this: what truth do I need to speak, even if no one else hears it? What truth do I need to speak? I opened my heart prematurely. I trusted without really knowing in whom I was placing my trust. I was so afraid of being alone that I held on way past the expiration date. I didn't want to hear what I was hearing. I didn't want to see what I was seeing. Is that part of my truth that I need to, admit to myself? This may not tickle, but I assure you, this will help you. This will empower you. You do not need their permission to heal. You don't need their apology. You need your own truth, and you need your own, perhaps the most important, apology. You need your own. Apologize and forgive yourself for thinking that holding on would get you there. Thinking that fantasizing would get you there. Hoping against hope. Every red light, every evening before bed, will that text come through? You don't need their permission. You don't need their apology. You don't need their text. You need your own truth. You are the witness. You are the witness. You are your witness. And I submit to you that is holy, HOLYWHOLLY, enough. That is enough, because you are enough. And you always have been, whether or not the other person acknowledged or saw it. See who you are in your own eyes. See who you are in your own esteem, not puffed up, but honest, level-headed, clear-headed, not foggy-minded, not avoidant, not detached, truthful. It takes courage to face the truth. It takes mastery. Well, it takes courage. Once you do it, actually, you have mastery. That's how that goes. So, dear listeners, wide receivers, be the receiver of your own benevolence, your own forgiveness, your own compassionate recognition. Be your own best friend. Reparent that inner child who may have been carrying things that never got said. Get that journal. Call someone. It's time you say it. It's time you express it. You're worthy of your own voice. I promise you that. So, thank you. Thank you for spending this time with me. I will meet you back here next week, and we're going to talk about exploring. I wrote this down. We're going to explore actually the sort of the twin issue of holding on for an acknowledgement. We're going to talk about the emotional cost of self-abandonment. That's it's the twin issue, if you will. We're going to talk about the cost of emotional abandonment. You say, what? Emotional abandonment? I don't abandon myself. Well, there are ways in which I think many of us do that. I know I do at times. So I have to keep coming back and reminding myself. Because if we self-abandon, we're going to look at how to come back home to ourselves. So that's on the menu for next week. I hope you find the time to join me. Thank you. This has been a pleasure and an honor. I wish you well. You know this already, but I'm going to remind you, you are not only loved, you are love. You can't help it. You didn't do anything to get that way. And guess what? You can't do anything to unbecome that. So you're stuck with that. You are love. Spread it around. Thanks. I'll meet you back here next week. You're listening to Who Do You Think You Are? Have a great week. Love you all. Good night.